The midterm elections in America are coming up shortly. In fact, just a little less than 4 months from now in November 2026. And the outcome is very much in doubt. And I don't mean whether or not the Republican Party or the Democratic Party will get more votes than the other. No, I mean whether or not Americans and the entire world actually will actually know the real, correct, legitimate results of that election. Hi, I'm David Dubato, and you're watching the No Delusion Zone on Monday, July 27th, 2026. And the focus of today's podcast is about the upcoming midterm elections in the United States that are happening the first week of November. And when I say that they're very much in doubt, I really mean that. You can read all the polls you want, and I don't know if most, but at least half of the polls that you'll read in the United States will say that the Democrats are ahead. Some of them will say that they're ahead by a whole lot. Some will say that it's neck and neck. But I would say that at least half the polls say that the Democrats have a lead in the midterm elections for the House of Representatives, that is, the lower house of our government. It's pretty much neck and neck, I would say, and not able to really be called in the Senate. That's much, much closer. But in the House of Representatives, most polls, but not all, but most polls give it to the Democrats. However, I think that's irrelevant, as well as many, many other political scientists and analysts, because Donald Trump has been saying, well, for years, that he doesn't consider that America has secure elections. That goes against all government agencies, his own government agencies, who have done numerous studies and analysis of the voting system in the United States, and all of them have come out with the conclusion that the United States does have, in fact, a very secure election system. And before Trump, both parties, when they were in power, did the same type of investigations and analysis. They also came to the conclusion that the United States was, if not the most secure voting system in the world, one of the most secure voting systems in the world. And when Donald Trump, as he continues to make his baseless lies about the 2020 election being stolen, 62, I believe it's 62 courts in the United States ruled against him. And many of the judges in those cases were appointed either by Republican presidents such as George Bush or by Trump himself. And they all said that, no, Mr. President, the 2020 elections were legitimate. They were not stolen. They were not covered up or, in the bag in any way. He lost. Trump lost every case that he brought before all courts in the United States, saying that the 2020 election was stolen. Of course, that doesn't stop his insane, moronic, illiterate MAGA morons from still believing 6 years on that the 2020 election was stolen. That's another story. What I want to talk about today is his continuing efforts to delegitimize the election system, the electoral system in general in America, because many of his supporters do still believe that the election system here is broken. And that does not bode well for the upcoming elections, but certainly the one, like I said, just coming up in November. If Americans do not trust their voting system, then many of them just won't vote. And the ones that do won't trust the results, unless, of course, that the Republicans win. When the Republicans win, then they say that our voting system is the best and safest and most secure in the world, in the history of the planet. But when they lose, it's illegitimate. It's a fraud. The Democrats have rigged the election. There's a new story that I want to talk about today that appeared in The Guardian out of the UK. And as you can see, it's titled, How Trump Could Undermine the Midterms. And I want to read some excerpts from this piece and then talk about it. And it starts, when Donald Trump commandeered primetime U.S. television last Friday, he delivered a familiar but still extraordinary message. The president argued once again that the results of the 2020 election, which he did lose to Joe Biden, were illegitimate. U.S. elections are vulnerable to being rigged and stolen, Trump alleged, claiming that the trust of the American people was lost when he was defeated. Historically, incumbent parties underperform in midterm elections, and with the president's popularity sagging, he has an approval rating of just 37%. Republicans appear on course to lose seats in the U.S. Senate and House of Representatives, as well as in state and local elections in November. Trump's latest intervention, in which he accused China of interfering with the 2020 election, is viewed by U.S. voting rights advocates as just the latest escalation of an effort by the White House to influence and potentially alter the results of the midterm elections. And the piece does go on, and I'm going to read a little bit of that piece in just a few moments. But again, we are in a time right now where Trump has repeatedly over the years said that the 2020 election was rigged, was stolen. It's not illegitimate. He has never stopped trumpeting that lie, that disgusting piece of garbage. And now that he's president once again, he has the power of the federal government to try to intervene, to alter, to himself rig the elections. Now, for those of you who don't know, although it's been in the media a lot, both the mainstream and the non-mainstream media, the elections in the United States are not controlled by the federal government. They are controlled by the states, and that is in the Constitution. And it was done, obviously, intentionally to prevent someone like Trump, a dictator or wannabe dictator or tyrant, to interfere with the elections and swing them for him or her so they could stay in office, probably forever or for the rest of their lives. So the states, the individual states, 50 states in America, control their own elections. So Trump can't legally, and focus on that word, legally change that law, at least not right now. He must abide by the fact that the states control the elections. Does that mean that he can't interfere? That he can't do something to rig the elections for him and the Republican Party, the MAGA Party? Of course he can. Like I said, he's in charge of the federal government right now. He controls the police. He controls the federal law enforcement agencies. He controls the Department of Justice and the military. So can he force the states to do something that they don't want to do legally? No. But he can do many, many things aside from going outside the law and trying to force the states to do something and bend to his will. For example, he could appoint electors, or he can appoint people, call them whatever you want, marshals, volunteers, whatever, at each polling place, and say that they are going to now count the votes. The states can still run the elections, but after the states allegedly count the votes or take in all the ballots, he can force his own people, federal people, or even go one step further. He can make them on the state level, which he's tried to do in the 2020 election. He had fraudulent electors and ballot counters appointed, and that went to court. They all lost. Some of them went to prison. In any event, he could try to appoint state ballot counters, state electors, and have them count the ballots after they come in. And guess who would win in that case? I would think it would be the Republicans. The other thing that he can do, which is much more blatant, much more obvious, and is in fact a violation of state and federal law, but which I think is possibly one of the most probable courses of action for Trump, is to place federal law enforcement agencies such as the Department of Homeland Security or the FBI or ATF or any number of other federal law enforcement agencies outside the polling places, not inside, not in the lines where people stand because they have to be a certain amount of feet away from the polling place. But what he can do is place a line, a gauntlet line of federal law enforcement officers outside the polling place, outside the zone where you can't stand, to try to influence voters and intimidate them. There's any number of ways to intimidate them as they're approaching the polling place. For example, they can demand to see their ID. Do they have to show ID outside the polling place? No. But many people would be intimidated and would either show the ID to the police, to the law enforcement officer, or they would just leave, especially if they are an immigrant, somebody that is not a native to this country, but is a citizen and is legally able to vote. They may not know all the ins and outs of the law, or may just be afraid of law enforcement, period, or they don't want to drag their family into this. So they might just leave. And that could happen at every polling place in the country. That would total into the hundreds of thousands, possibly even into the millions of people who would decide not to vote. Just walk away. It's not worth it. That very likely could happen. I fear that is the most likely course of action. It's the most blatant. It's possibly the most violent. People can get hurt, can get shot. And if they resist, which many would probably do, they will be arrested. How many of us have not seen videos of DHS shooting and killing people on the street for not very much, just for protesting, for holding up a sign or driving a car away from DHS officers and being shot to death in the street? Just imagine if some voters, some potential voters outside of a polling place during this next election physically had an altercation, decided not to give their ID to the DHS officer, and that DHS officer or officers decided to get a little physical and demand forcibly that that person show them their ID. A scuffle ensued. The person got shot. I can see this happening over and over again. It is not far-fetched. I think unfortunately it may be inevitable. That's what I think might happen. Let me just now read that last piece here from The Guardian. Trump's increasingly inflammatory rhetoric is in itself a threat to the integrity of the 2026 election, says Georgia State Senator Syra Draper, a leading voting administration expert who warned that narrative attacks are designed to undermine outcomes regardless of who wins. By sowing distrust in elections, no matter what the outcome is, he continues on the division, whether his party wins or not, into the next term, said Draper, who suggested that such constant rhetoric turns followers into foot soldiers for the cause. Some of those foot soldiers sit on county boards of elections, which are required to certify elections. And some are running for office, successfully winning the Republican nomination, like Alex Kodolin, who helped lead failed legal efforts to overturn Arizona's 2020 and 22 election results, who is now the Republican candidate for Arizonan Secretary of State. It's top election officials. So, I mean, there you have it. Another one of the moronic, insane, traitorous election deniers is very possibly going to be the top election official in Arizona. And that's happening across the United States. People, election deniers, are candidates. Some of them have won their primaries already to become everything from state legislatures to mayors to governors, and in this case, an election official. So, no, we're in grave, grave danger. This election. I mean, I can't stress it any more than I can. And if you want to call that hyperbole, go for it. Because if you do, you're MAGA, and I don't really listen to what you have to say. You've drunk the Kool-Aid, and you're brainwashed. So it really doesn't matter what you say. I've tried in the past, and I don't waste my time anymore. In any event, folks, we've got less than 4 months till the November midterm elections in the United States for 2026. I fear the worst. I really do. I pray for the best, but I fear for the worst because the constant drumbeat by Trump every single day about how he lost the 2020 election 6 years later, and how the 2026 election is also rigged in his beetle brain, doesn't bode well. Doesn't bode well at all for what's going to happen in November or for our country. That's all for today. So please stay tuned for my next podcast. And as always, please support this channel. Tell people that you know to come here to the No Delusion Zone. Like and subscribe to the No Delusion Zone. Need all the support I can get because things are, as I showed you, pretty interesting here. So until next time, look, as I always tell you, take care, stay safe, and stay sane.